Creating complex surfaces. We're going to talk about the command patch versus loft. We're going to talk about transformations and trim and split. So in order to create a surface from a family of curves, we're going to go to the right plane and we're going to create a curve from control point curve, and we're going to sketch a curve with random points. At this point, I don't care about the shape of my curve as much as the family of curves that I want. Enter. To create another curve, we'll do Ctrl C, Ctrl V, and copy that curve and translate or move that curve. Then I'm going to do Ctrl C, Ctrl V, and move that curve from the red arrow to the opposite direction. So with that curve selected, I'm going to go to the right view and I'm going to click on the control point that I want to modify. This point I'm going to modify to this position. Don't click on the next curve because we are going to get that one after we modify this curve. If you want to modify this curve, then you go to that curve and select the point and shift to select more than one point, and then move freely with these 4 squares. If you move this arrow, you'll move in this direction, and the red arrow will be in this direction. The 4 squares is to move freely around any direction. Okay, so we have double click right view, and then we have this family of curves. Then we're going to go to perform a loft operation. So loft from the command line, or go to surface loft. So select curves to loft. It's important to keep the order consistent. So first one, second, and third one. Enter. And this is the surface that is generated from the family of curves. Now, if I want to trim or split this surface, I can go to my views and trim the shape that I want from a projection or from a split command. So for instance, I'm going to go to my top view and I'm going to draw a circle. And I'm going to then project that circle from curve, curve from object, project, curve to project, enter, surface, enter. So now the curve has been projected on the surface. To cut this part from the surface, I am going to perform a split operation. So objects to split, enter, and the curve that I want to use to split, enter. Notice that now I can split this part. Now another way to do this is Ctrl Z. Before I project the curve, I can go to, before we use split, now you can go to trim. So cutting objects, this curve, enter, and the surface, enter. The difference is that before I was able to keep both surfaces. Now it's only keeping the surface within my splitting area or region. Okay, so I'm going to use my split command one more time. For that I need to project this surface. So I'm going to go to curve, curve from object, project. This one is the curve, enter. On this surface, enter. And then split. Objects to split is the surface. I want to split the surface. And then the curve on the surface. So now I want to split the surface. So objects to split is the surface, enter. Now I choose the curve on the surface, enter. Notice that before I chose the curve on the plane for trimming, but now I select the curve projected on the surface for splitting. And now I have two surfaces that I can use, this surface and that surface. With the arrow, you move the part. Remember, the Rhino keeps the construction curve, and you can delete them later or move them to a different layer. The way you move them to a different layer is from layers. You go to layer, you can rename them curves, and then select your curve, shift to select more than one, and then go to the layer and move them. Now if you notice, they changed their color to the layer color, and if you hide that layer, then the curves are also hidden. Now remember, this arrow will move your surface. If you want to extrude your surface, method to extrude in one direction is click on your surface, and then this circle you'll extend it, and that will create a closed surface. And you can check the volume of that surface, of that volume of that body. It's 35,114 cubic centimeters. Same here, you can extrude it with the circle, or you can extrude it in a different direction. So depending on what you want. Now another thing that I want to show is go back to the layers that I created and go to curves, hide this one, and show this one. So select this one, shift this one, shift this one, and I'm gonna hide them. That is one way. The other way to hide them is with the light bulb, hide objects. So if I perform a patch operation on this curve, I can also generate a curve from, I can also generate a surface from that curve. But notice that the area of this surface is 5,083 square centimeters versus before we're gonna explode this one and do extract surface. Before, this was my surface. The area of this surface is 5,169 square centimeters. So the area is different. And that's because this, delete this part and go back to my surface. This surface, if you do your control points, notice that this surface is generated from your family of curves that generated a surface from your loft command. Versus here, I'm gonna hide this one. Versus here, the area was 5,083 square centimeters. If you show your control points, here is a surface from a base surface that Rhino uses. So the difference is that the area of my default layer, so the difference is that the area in this curve is less because the curvature is also less. Remember that before, if we go back to this one, before I was using a larger curvature. So it really depends on how you want to work with your surface. Now, if you want to get rid of these control points, you press F10, escape. And if you want to modify the surface, you go to rebuild. And I'm going to use, it had 5 curve, it had originally had 5 curves on the U direction and 13 on the V direction. It's suggesting that I move to 16. I'm going to go to 12 instead. You can see here how it looks like, and then I'm gonna keep it at degree 3. That's fine. So now when you do F10, you can get these points and move them. And now your surface is deformed. So I'm going to get rid of my control points, F10, escape. Another method that you can use is a patch from a seed curve. So let's go ahead and create a circle. I'm going to place it at 0, 0, 0, and it's going to have 20 centimeters in radius, and 20 centimeters in diameter. Notice that you can write the dimension, the units. Okay, now I'm going to create my curve. Go to control point curve, and on my front plane, I'm going to start from be outside the curve. Enter. And now I'm going to type curve to view. Curve to view. Enter. Select the first curve. It's going to be my circle. Select the second curve. It's going to be my profile. And this is the curve that it generated. So I'm going to hide my circle. I don't need that anymore. And I need to use this family of curves to generate my patch. However, if I generate my patch right now, and I select this curve and this curve, I am going to get this nice shape that is non-uniform. Before, if I didn't want to use this, if I didn't want to use the seed, and I created a patch with just the boundary of the closed curve, notice that the surface that it generates is completely different. If you press F10, you can see that it's using a surface that Rhino computed for the curvature of that surface, of that closed curve. So I'm going to get rid of my control points, F10, escape, F10, escape, and Control Z, and I'm going to say patch. this curve and that seed, enter. Now I have my curve. Now the area of this curve is the surface area of this curve is 2475 square centimeters. If I press on the arrows, I can move my surface. And if I click on the circle, I can extrude it. And now, notice that before, if I were to press volume, if I were to type volume and then select my surface, it will tell me some of the selected objects are not closed. But if I create a solid, now I type volume, and then now it's a solid volume. It's 12,057 cubic centimeters. So if you were to 3D print this part, now you know how much volume it will require, and depending on your resin's density, you more or less will know what it will be the cost. So actually to create your 3D to perform your 3D printing job, you'll have to save as and save it as STL. For most 3D printers, this is the format that you'll need to use. But I don't need to save it right now. I would like to go back to my default layer and recap. So what we did was that we created a complex surface or complex surfaces using the patch and loft command. We performed transformations such as translations, and we can also perform rotations and scaling. So if we go to this part and we want to rotate this part, we just need to click on these circles and that will rotate my part. If I want to scale, I simply go to scale command, and now it will ask me for the place to scale, and then now it's scaled. Area. Now it's 11,000 square centimeters. So we have studied transformations and trim and split commands on surfaces.